Name is Tembo, President of the Patriots for Economic Progress. He's our guest this evening on the special interview with me, Chisha Chola, as your host, and we assimilate the role of the opposition in governance. Good evening.
Good evening, Chisha. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
And of course, a very good evening to the viewers out there.
All right, great to have you, Mr. President. We appreciate you coming through.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine.
All right, let's begin off in understanding who you, Mr. Tembo, is and what inspires your political ideologies.
Well, in terms of my personal background, I grew up here in Lusaka. I was born in the eastern province of Zambia, Jabo village in particular, Chief Kapata Moyo, Chipata district. And I grew up in Mtendere compound. I went to Shtukuko Primary School in Mtendere there, then went to Kabronga Boys Secondary School, then went to Livingstone at Hillcrest, then went to Copperbelt University, where I did my Bachelor of Accountancy degree, and then I proceeded to Zambia Center for Accountancy Studies, ZICAS, where I did my SCCA, that is Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. And then I also did a master's degree in business administration from the University of Derby in the United Kingdom. Professionally, I worked for a couple of years at PricewaterhouseCoopers before I started my own audit firm, which I still operate up to this day. Family-wise, I'm happily married, and I've got 5 children, of which 4 are girls and 1 is a boy. Yes.
All right. Let's get into the core values of the Patriots for Economic Progress as a political party.
Well, our core values are fourfold. We believe in 4 critical principles as a party. The first one is patriotism, which simply means that we love this country dearly. We really want the best for Zambia. And we are willing not just to wish, but to actually take active steps towards the realization of our dream of seeing a better Zambia. So we are 100% patriotic. There's no question about that. So patriotism is number 1. Number 2 is accountability. We believe in the accountable use of public resources. And when we talk about accountability, we are not just talking about accountability at a national level in terms of holding the government of the day accountable. We are talking about accountability even in the manner and fashion with which we manage our own party affairs. We are accountable to our members as Patriots for Economic Progress. So that is accountability. Number 3, we believe in competence. In other words, we do understand and appreciate the fact that in any society, there will be people that can do things better than others. And what we believe in is to choose the best person to do a particular job. So we believe in competence, and that reflects in the structures of our party. And should the Zambian people be gracious enough to allow us to form government in 2026, we promise them that we are going to run an extremely competent government, because we are going to ensure that whoever is appointed to a position of responsibility is the best possible Zambian that can occupy that particular position. So that is competence. And number 4, which is the last one, we believe in courage. We believe that without courage, there's nothing you can achieve. It doesn't matter what vision, what dreams you have, you need to have courage. So we are courageous. We are not intimidated by anybody whatsoever. Whether the source of possible intimidation is our political opponents in the opposition or the government of the day, and it doesn't matter whether that government of the day is the Patriotic Front, which left, or the new government, which is the UPND administration. We are not intimidated, and we shall never be intimidated. So if there's anybody out there who has any ideas to say we are going to intimidate the Patriots for Economic Progress in general, or we are going to intimidate Tembo, they should forget about it.
All right, now you've talked about if the Zambians give you a chance in 2026 to form government. Now, if you were to be president, Mr. Tembo, what policies would you push in the first 100 days that you are inaugurated?
In the first 100 days, I would ensure that we address the issue of, uplifting the vulnerable in our society, the poor and vulnerable. And when you look at the majority of our poor in Zambia, these are usually in the outskirts of our country, in the rural areas. You understand? They are in the rural areas. And their main economic activity is farming. That is the majority of the vulnerable in Zambia. Farming is their only economic activity. That's the only way they actually earn a living. And so my first order of business would be to ensure that my government provides a market for whatever is produced by the farmers. Because by so doing, Chisha, you are actually not only uplifting the most poor and vulnerable in our society, but you are actually also encouraging productivity. One of the things that the peasant farmers out there in the outskirts of Zambia face is the lack of proper market, stable market for their agricultural produce. So my government will ensure that in the first 100 days, we offer a price which we are going to guarantee. And then it will be up to my government now to go and look for where we can export that produce that we buy. It doesn't matter what produce it is, whether it is groundnuts, whether it is maize, whether it is cassava, whether it is wheat, soybeans. Provided the farmer produces, my government will give a guarantee and assurance that we shall buy it at a sustainable price which will allow the farmer to make a profit. I say that because when you look at most of the interventions that are made here in this country, not only by the current government, but even by other governments in the past, you realize that we pay too much focus to the people that are in town, the people that are noisy, the people that have a voice. We forget completely the people that do not have a voice. And the majority of the people who don't have a voice are the peasant farmers who are in Gwembe there, peasant farmers who are in Vubwi and Chadiza, peasant farmers who are in Kaputa. So that will be my first order of business. It's a win-win situation. In other words, we are guaranteeing a market to the farmers. We are putting some money in the pockets of the farmers. At the same time, we as a government are able to acquire that agricultural produce, and then it is up to my government now to scout for a market for that agricultural produce. If I talk to my counterpart in DRC and I'm able to sell some of that produce, I'll do that. But whatever the case, the farmer can be guaranteed that whatever they produce will be bought by my government.
All right. Now, is that you've only talked about one policy? I asked you what policies. Maybe you could add one more that you have planned for the Zambian people.
Yeah. So when you look at our other objectives, such as job creation, you realize that it all feeds into that policy of providing a market for agricultural produce. Because when you provide a stable market, and I want to underline two words here, stable and sustainable. When I say stable, I mean a farmer should be able to know at what price my government is going to buy their maize next farming season before they put the grain in the ground. They need to know. That provides stability.
And how do you create that environment, that stable environment?
So that stable environment will be created by the establishment of a fund which will be utilized to purchase any agricultural produce from the farmer, and then we as government, we put in place storage facilities to keep that grain. You know, with latest technology, you can keep grain up to 30 years, 40 years. You understand? So we'll invest in the necessary storage facilities so that whatever grain is produced by the farmer, we buy it and we store it. And then when we secure a market for it, whether it is domestic market or external market, we are able to offload from our storage as a government. So it should not be up to the private sector to store maize and then try to run around looking for market. No. Whatever is produced will be purchased by the government. Any excess will be purchased by the government. You will not see any wastage. Now, why that is important, Chisha, is because if you provide a stable and sustainable market. Stable means a farmer is able to know the price of the price at which they will sell their produce next farming season. Sustainable means that price is such that they're able to make a profit. They can cover their expenses and make a profit. So stable and sustainable. Once we provide a stable and sustainable marketing environment for agricultural produce, what that will do is that more people will be encouraged to produce, because their only headache will be to produce. The issue of a market, like what we are facing right now, lack of empty grain bags, FRA saying they've stopped buying, all that chaos will not be there. A farmer will only be focused on producing. And when a farmer is focusing on producing, they'll be able to make a profit. Sooner or later, when you go in the outskirts of the country, you'll find that there will be more farmers who will be driving vehicles, and yet their only activity is farming. So what that will do is that a person who is here in town and is working as a security guard and is getting paid 800 kwacha, will think twice and say, but my uncle who I left in the village is now got a canter just by farming. Me, I'm here in town. When I earn this 800 kwacha, I need to pay rent 200 kwacha. I need to buy mini meal. I need to do this and that. It's not sustainable. Let me quit my job and go to the farm and start farming, because the government has guaranteed a stable and sustainable market for agricultural produce. So you'll be able to address the issue of unemployment. You'll be able to address the issue of the cost of living, because the reason why a lot of Zambians are suffering is because they are running away from the rural areas to the urban areas, and there are only so many jobs in the urban areas. Most of them end up being either unemployed or being employed in substandard jobs, jobs that are giving them a salary which is not enough to sustain themselves. So when you address the issue of agriculture, and agriculture needs to be treated as an entrepreneurship venture, not as a way of life. It's a business. It should be treated as a business, and my government will treat it as such.
All right. Let's get to understand. I know that there is quite a lot of criticism that you've given to the current president,
yes.
The 7th president of the Republic of Zambia. Now, if you were to have a one-on-one interaction and conversation with His Excellency President Hakainde Hichilema, what advice would you give coming from Sean Tembo?
Well, for us, Chisha, we've been advising President Hakainde Hichilema since the word go, from the day that he was inaugurated as president of Zambia. In fact, our advice started way before he was even inaugurated, just when he won. And the reason why we are very sincere to Mr. Hichilema, the reason why we have a high appetite of actually advising him, is because we know that when President Hichilema succeeds, Zambia and Zambians at large will also succeed, because he is the current president of Zambia. So for us, we are not in the business of wishing Mr. Hichilema to fail so that we can, the Zambian people can consider us to run the affairs of the country. No, we want him to succeed up to the point that his term will end, so that from there now we can get into the driving seat and take Zambia even further. You understand? And one of the first pieces of advice that I made personally to President Hichilema was for him to ensure that everyone he appoints them on the basis of competence.
Is he what he's doing now?
Not at all, not at all, not at all. For us, we started raising issues from the time he started making his early appointments. You find that, in our view, he was appointing people to positions of authority based on his repayment of a debt to him, based on the fact that these are people who assisted him to ascend to the presidency. So you find that he appoints his personal lawyer in a senior government position, he appoints his business associates in senior government positions. The moment you do that, you are laying the groundwork for failure. No. Because the moment you are not surrounded by competent people, you can be rest assured that the quality of decisions that will trickle down will be poor. There will be poor quality decisions that will actually trickle down on the ground. And at the end of the day, when people start blaming, they'll blame you, the president, and not the people that you appointed. I'll give you a number of examples of the incompetence that has been going on in the UPND administration. You can tell that the government as a whole, they don't spend enough time together to actually talk about what they'll do for this country. It appears that only President Hakainde Hichilema has a plan of what should be done in Zambia. Everybody else is clueless. That is why you find that 1 minute, a Minister of Home Affairs, who is a very senior minister in any cabinet, makes a pronouncement and says they are supporting the return of cadres to markets, and even makes a lengthy justification, not just on media, but in parliament, makes a ministerial statement. When a minister makes a ministerial statement in any government, anywhere in the world, that constitutes government policy. It constitutes government policy. And then followed by the Minister of Home Affairs, you have the Minister of Local Government re-echoing the same position on the issue of cadres return to markets. And then a few days later, you hear the president saying, no, cadres will not be allowed to go back to markets. That shows a disconnect. It shows a disconnect between the president and the cabinet which he leads. And that can only happen if the president is not able to communicate to the people, or the people he has appointed are incompetent. They are not able to understand the vision and the plans that the president has. And that is not an isolated case, Chisha. You have another incident where 1 minute the Minister of Home Affairs makes a pronouncement saying that police should disband all roadblocks. They should disband all roadblocks. He even makes disparaging remarks against the men and women in uniform, saying that they normally mount a roadblock if they don't have money in their pocket. They want to make change for themselves. You understand? We know that the police as an organization, there are certain few elements in there who might be corrupt, just like any other organization. Even the church, within a church, you find some corrupt elements in there. Any organization has certain elements who are corrupt, but you cannot taint the entire organization and say this whole organization is corrupt. So it was totally out of order for the Minister of Home Affairs to insult each and every man in uniform by calling them corrupt. And then he makes that statement 1 minute. The next minute, you have the Vice President of the Republic making a statement saying that roadblocks are necessary and they will be brought back. So that shows you that there's a disconnect within government. The right hand does not know what the left hand is actually doing. And the moment you have that, those are simple issues, very basic issues. Yes. So if you as a government, you are failing to coordinate on such basic issues, then how are you going to be able to actually function together in terms of implementing Zambia's economic transformation agenda, which is a more complicated subject? If you can't get basic small things right, how are you going to get something that is complicated right? You can't.
Well, Mr. Tembo, you did mention that the president has appointed some incompetent people based on per se, for lack of a better word, the aspect of favoring or biasness. And you've mentioned quite a lot of people, the Minister of Home Affairs, you've mentioned also the Vice President. Do you believe these people that you've mentioned are not competent enough to hold these duty-bearer positions?
Well, I think given the fact that these are mere appointees, we cannot put any blame on these individuals. I think the blame goes squarely to the president. My take is that Mr. Hakainde Hichilema is not the wonder kid that people thought he was. He is not the economic wizard that people thought he was. To the contrary, I strongly believe that President Hakainde Hichilema actually is clueless about how this country should be managed. And for now, people are giving him the benefit of the doubt because they're saying it's early in his administration. He's still, getting his feet on the ground. But I'll tell you something, Shisha. For me, I'm glad to mention that I have, the ability to tell whether someone has what it takes to get a job done. I have that ability. And, I'll say something which a few months or a few years later, people will begin to agree and say, so you were right after all. I'll give you an example. In 2015, the 2015 by-election, presidential by-election, I decided to support Mr. Edgar Lungu as president of Zambia in that particular election. And I based that support on what I saw. He's a lawyer, he's young, possibly he will drive the country in a better direction. And then a few months later, I think the election was in January, by around March, end of March, based on the policies that the president was implementing, based on his failure to address the issue of the power deficit at that time, which really destroyed the economy, I literally saw that Mr. Lungu is unlikely to take us anywhere. And I made that position very clearly. I said, on paper, he looks like he has the credentials, but based on the quality of decisions made so far, quality of appointments, this man is not going to take us anywhere. And that time, he was only 3 months in office. And people were up in arms against me. No, you can't judge someone so early, this and that. And right here and right now, I'm telling the Zambian people to say there is nothing that will come out of President Hichilema's presidency in terms of adding value to this country. Nothing whatsoever. Nothing. If anything, he's going to take this country backwards. And I want you to quote these words 2 years from now. Right now, there might be maybe 70% or 80% of the people that will disagree with me. 2 years from now, there will be 10% of the people that will be disagreeing with me. The other 90% will be agreeing with me because they would have seen ample evidence. I'm warning the Zambian people right here and right now.
All right. Now, I'm still on the aspect of the incompetent positions that have been appointed or selected by the president. I want you to clearly tell the Zambian people which names are those, Mr. Sean Tembo.
Well, when you look at, I'll start with the ministers.
Yeah.
When you talk about competence, Mr. Chisha, you are talking about the ability to do the job right and the ability to exercise proper judgment in the doing of that particular job. I'll give you an example of the Minister of Finance and the decision by the minister to implement the 20% withholding tax on betting winnings. You understand? And the manner in which that implementation was actually done. You realize that that particular law was enacted in 2014 by the previous PF administration, in fact, under the late former President Michael Sata. But they did not implement it. There's a reason why they did not implement it. They wanted to revise that law. But the UPND administration came into office without any consultation. They decided to implement that law. Now, the problem with that law is that it is problematic in a number of ways. You realize that number one, it is an unfair law. And I say it is unfair because any tax that is imposed on the citizens is supposed to be fair and equitable. It's supposed to be fair and equitable. When you look at that particular tax, you realize that this person who has won a ticket worth 200 kwacha is being taxed 20% from there, which is 40 kwacha, and yet the person would have lost maybe 10 times before winning that ticket. And those other times he has lost will not be taken into account. You understand? It's not taken into account. And also the amount of money that is being taxed. You find that the government taxes even a 20 kwacha, which is one. It will get its 20% tax. Now, that is unfair because even people who are formerly employed, are given a certain tax exemption. Every month they are given an exemption of up to 4,000 kwacha on pay as you earn. Anybody getting paid up to 4,000 kwacha is not taxed a single way. So if you are giving an exemption to people who are formerly employed, then why can't you give a similar exemption to the people who are unemployed and engage in these betting activities? Why can't you do that? Why can't you put a threshold and say, we are going to monitor your phone number, which you are using to place these online bets, and at the end of a month, we'll be able to see how much you've won, and based on how much you've won, if you win anything above 4,000 kwacha, the amount on top will be taxed at this particular rate. You understand? You are being fair there. You cannot have a situation whereby someone wins 500 kwacha. It's the only winning he has ever made in the past 3 months after he spent more than 1,000 kwacha betting, and then you tax that particular amount. It is totally unfair and it is unjustified. Now, here is the problem. Most people will say, but you want to prevent the issue of people betting. Betting will always be there. It is a habit which some people have, and it is a habit which other people frown upon. It is like drinking beer. People always drink beer. Drinking beer is a habit which others like, and it is a habit which others frown upon. And you cannot, as a government, you cannot come up with measures to prevent people from being able to exercise their free will. Whether they want to smoke a cigarette, whether they want to drink a beer, whether they want to bet, the government should allow people to exercise their free will. You understand? Other governments in the past have tried to impose restrictions on the social behavior of citizens, such as America. In the early 20s, America imposed a law which prohibited the drinking of alcohol. You remember vividly, I'm sure, what that brought about. It brought about an escalation in crime. People were selling alcohol underground. it is the origin of the mafia actually in America because of trying to restrict the social behavior of human beings. You understand? So the decision by government to impose that particular 20% tax on the basis that it will prevent Zambians from actually engaging in a lot of betting is actually detrimental, because what is likely to happen is that instead of people engaging in legal betting, they will engage in illegal betting. And when you do underground betting, it will bring all sorts of social ills, such as, let me just finish my thought.
Quickly, Mr. Tembo.
Yes. Such as, illicit betting brings about crime. Because someone will place a bet, and then when they win, the person who they bet with doesn't want to honor that bet, and they need to bring about conflict. So there's need to really reflect on this particular issue. So when you have a Minister of Finance who cannot properly consider, properly exercise judgment on these matters, then that person is not fit for the particular job.
All right, so you're declaring that Honorable Msokotwane is not fit to be a Minister of Finance?
Yes, for a number of reasons, including his decision to bring about the International Monetary Fund to put Zambia on an IMF bailout package. When you look at the issue of the IMF, Chisha, if you allow me, that is, it looks like I'm over-explaining.
Yes. Please be quick.
When you look at the issue of the IMF, there are two primary reasons why a country should be placed on an IMF bailout. First of all, it's called an IMF bailout because it symbolizes the fact that you are in deep trouble and therefore you need to be bailed out. So the characteristics which would define you being in trouble as a country are basically two. Number one, you have a perpetual balance of payment deficit. A balance of payment deficit is simply a situation whereby you are importing more things than you are exporting. You understand? When you import, you need forex. When you export, you earn forex. So if you are importing more goods than you are exporting, what happens there is that you run out of forex. And the major forex that we know about is the US dollar, isn't it? So you won't have dollars to be able to import the fuel that you need, the whatever that you need, because you are not exporting enough. And when you look at the history of Zambia in the past 24 months, you realize that we had a balance of payment deficit up to around mid of 2020. And from mid of 2020 up to now, we've had a consistent balance of payment surplus, which means we are exporting more than we are actually importing. And that is largely attributed to the fact that the price of copper on the world market has significantly increased. It has almost doubled over the past 18 months. And the trend is driven largely by the fact that there is a huge demand for electric vehicles. That demand for electric vehicles is likely to be sustained for the next 50 to 100 years, because the entire world is moving towards greener vehicles, and they want to stop using diesel and fuel and petrol. You understand? So the demand for copper is likely to be sustainably higher for the next 50 to 100 years, which means we are going to be in a balance of payment position surplus for the foreseeable future. You understand? When you look at the other reason, which is having a perpetual fiscal deficit, that is a situation whereby you actually are not generating enough funds as a government to be able to meet your expenditure. So you have a fiscal deficit. And when you look at the ability of government to generate income, mostly tax revenue, you realize that we've been surpassing our budgets consistently over the past 24 months or so. So if we are not in a balance of payment deficit and we are not in a fiscal deficit, then why do we need an IMF bailout loan? Why do we need a bailout run? We don't need to be bailed out. It's like telling a person who is not arrested that you need to apply for bail. Why do they need to apply for bail? They don't need to apply for bail because they haven't been arrested. They are not in custody. Only a person in custody can apply for bail. Just like only a country which is in dire financial trouble can apply for an IMF bailout. I want to underline the word bailout there. IMF bailout loan. You understand? So when you have a minister who believes that we need the IMF, even despite the fact that there is no evidence that we need the IMF, then that person is incompetent. And that incompetency trickles down all the way, or actually trickles up all the way to the president himself. Yes.
Well, quite a lot, something comprehensive that you've really talked about. And really, the whole fundamental issue, because even the president did clear that, they did speak out of the coffers being empty. And I do know for a fact that and you cannot always run an economy on funding money. But how different would you deal with the debt that we do have in Zambia as PEP and be able to still have the economy running? How different would you have done it from the UPND?
So when you look at our debt position at the moment, our biggest headache right now is the Eurobond.
Yeah.
The 1 billion which is maturing next year, 2022, and then we have the 1.25 billion which is maturing in 2023, and the 750 which is maturing in 2024. That is our immediate headache. When you look at these service, the quarterly repayments we make, those we can easily afford based on the resources that we generate. Because you're not talking about huge amounts here. Even the amounts that the PF defaulted on, it is an amount which is less than 100 million. First of all, we defaulted on about 55 million. Secondly, we defaulted on about 48 million. So that is money that if the PF government during that time wanted to pay that money, they could have paid. And from our point of view, Chisha, we expected the UPND government to clean the slate so that we can move properly forward. And the first two things that we expected the minister to do, the Minister of Finance, is to clear the outstanding arrears. Because as far as I'm concerned, I'm not aware of those two default amounts being cleared. If they have, then it wasn't announced to the media, but they haven't been cleared. And yet, we need to be able to raise funds to refinance our Eurobond, which is due next year. You understand? And you cannot go out there to the market to try and raise funds when you've defaulted. There is a $100 million default payment which you have not cleared. So, in my view, the president should have been talking about refinancing the Eurobond. The president and his cabinet should have been talking about refinancing the Eurobond by issuing another Eurobond next year. And that should have been done earlier. We could have even issued the replacement Eurobond even right now, so that when that one matures, we just clear it off. We don't need to issue an exact amount. We can reduce the amount that we issue. The amount which is due is about $1 billion. We can issue, let's say, $700 million, so that the other 300 million, we can clear it using our coffers. Our coffers are quite healthy at the moment. We have almost $3 billion in there. So when you get the 300 million to clear part of the Eurobond, that will be something that will be progressive. Now, if we are going to replace that particular Eurobond, that needed to be done, the groundwork needed to be done right now. Because the year 2021 is almost coming to an end. And that Eurobond is due quite early next year. So if we are not doing the work now, at what point are we going to do the work to address that issue of the Eurobond? And this effort that the president is making together with his Minister of Finance to try and get an IMF bailout run, that effort, all of it, that effort should have been shifted and applied towards refinancing our Eurobond. You understand? Because we cannot use the proceeds of the IMF to actually repay the Eurobond when it becomes due next year. Because even if we get on an IMF bailout package, what will happen is that the IMF does not give you a lump sum. That Eurobond that is due next year needs to be paid as a lump sum at once. What the IMF does when you get on a bailout package is that they'll give you certain conditions. They'll tell you to say you need to implement a wage freeze, which means you don't increase salaries of your civil servants and parastatal employees. You implement an employment freeze. You don't employ any new teachers or doctors or whatever the case. Once you do this, at the very beginning, then we'll give you, let's say you had applied for $1 billion IMF bailout money. We'll give you maybe 100 million, 10%. And then next milestone, you need to increase the prices of fuel and also increase the electricity tariffs so that they are cost reflective. When you achieve that particular milestone, we'll give you 20%, 200 million. Next milestone, you need to sell Zamtel and sell Zesco. When you achieve that milestone, we'll give you 30%, 300 million. Just like that. They'll set a series of milestones for you. When you achieve each milestone, they release a portion of that bailout money. You understand? So that bailout money that they give you, you cannot get those trickles of money that they give you to actually clear off a $1 billion Eurobond which is due next year and which needs to be repaid at once. not in installments, but at once, because it would have matured. The 10 years would have reached, and it would have matured. So the effort that President Hichilema is making towards putting Zambia on an IMF bailout loan is misplaced effort. His immediate worry should be to raise a fresh Eurobond to replace the one which is maturing next year, and maybe another Eurobond which is expiring, which is maturing 2023 and 2024. If you ask me, Chisha, if you allow me, very quickly,
yes.
I know I'm over-explaining myself.
You are comprehensively explaining. And,
yes, if you allow me, if you allow me,
yes, please.
You realize that if we are going to get favorable terms in terms of raising a fresh Eurobond to replace the one which is maturing, that needed to be done at the very early stage of the new administration. You know why? Because when you have a new president in office, that president, a lot of people have high expectations. They think he's going to do magic. You understand? By the time, and the hopes on the investor, in terms of investor confidence, will be high. Before that new president even opens his mouth, they'll be thinking this guy is a wonderful guy, his CV speaks for itself. So that is the time to actually fetch money on the world market in terms of raising a new Eurobond, so that you can get it cheaply. You understand? You get it cheaply. The moment that president starts messing up, the moment he starts making wrong statements, the moment his policy direction looks haphazard, then the level of investor confidence on the world market actually dwindles. When the level of investor confidence dwindles, then your replacement Eurobond will be more expensive. Right now, if we raise the Eurobond today to replace the one maturing next year, it will be far much more expensive than if we had raised it on the 24th of August, when President Hichilema was just inaugurated. Because investors have been reading the activities of the new government. They've been seeing the inconsistencies. And they're beginning to realize that this new government is a bunch of incompetent people after all. Yes.
All right. Well, a bunch of incompetent people is what you call them. But of course, the Minister of Youth, Sport and Arts, of course, according to the Daily Nation paper today, has warned you, Mr. Sean Tembo, do not take the freedom of expression for granted. What is your reaction to that? Before we get into the reaction of the presidential radio engagement and interaction that happened on Wednesday, what's your reaction to...
Shisha, there's this misconception by the UPND administration that people of Zambia exercise their freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom of assembly, because the UPND government is actually giving them those freedoms. And I want to say this, I'll say it once, that is absolute nonsense, total nonsense. The freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom of assembly that we enjoy as citizens in this country is something that is given to us by the Constitution of the Republic of Zambia. You understand? By the Constitution of the Republic of Zambia. The narrative which President Hichilema and his ministers have been driving, that the reason we speak the way we are speaking right here is because he has given us these freedoms, is total nonsense, absolute nonsense.
Well,
and I want to make it clear.
Of expression, Mr. Tembo.
I want to make it clear, Chisha, that we do not need to get any permission, and we do not need to receive any permission from the current government for us to be able to express ourselves. We don't. And we shall never. And if they think that we express ourselves because they allow us, then they should disallow us. Tell them to withdraw their permission for us to exercise our freedoms. Tell them to withdraw it right here and right now. Tell them to send the police to come and arrest me because I'm speaking about their government. I'm explaining to the people of Zambia how incompetent their government is. Tell them to withdraw that freedom if they feel they are the ones who actually give it to us.
Yeah, so I do know for a fact that yes, it is backed by law, but would you enjoy the same freedoms in the previous regime?
We've been speaking since time immemorial. If the PF, during the PF regime, when the PF tried to stop us by sending the police, we took the police to court. And we won the cases. So if the UPND administration wants to stop us, they can send their police, and we'll sue their police also, and we'll win in court. And I want to tell the president right here and right now, I want to tell President Ichilema, if he thinks he is giving us, he's the one giving us the freedom of expression that we are enjoying right here and right now, let him withdraw that freedom of expression right now. Let him send his policemen to come and arrest me. And I want him to do it tonight. Let him withdraw. We don't need his permission. We don't want him to give us any permission to express ourselves. Since he thinks he's the one who gives us that permission, we don't need that permission.
All right, let's go to the assessment of the radio engagement that the president did have on Wednesday. On the 13th of October 2021, he did have a radio engagement at State House on a particular radio station. What's your assessment as patriots for economic progress and as Sean Tembo, the president that's leading that political party?
Well, for us, particularly Chisha, we find it extremely regrettable that the president is spending a lot of time talking and very little time, making his talk reality, realizing the promises that he made. So far, he's been in office for some time and he hasn't realized a single promise that he made, not a single one of them. He's always talking. When he was in the opposition, like any opposition leader, he was always in the media, he was always making promises. All sorts of promises. No one ever compelled him to make those promises. It was him and him alone who was saying that when he's sworn in the morning, in the afternoon, the dollar will appreciate. It is him and him alone who was saying if he's voted into office in the morning, in the afternoon, he will sell the presidential jet and use that money to pay meal allowances for students. You understand? It is him. No one put a gun to his head. No one did that. It was him, out of his own volition. It was him and him alone who told the farmers, the Zambian farmers, that the moment he is actually elected into office, he is going to buy their maize at 250 kwacha. It is him, not anyone else, not Sean Tembo. No, I didn't compel HH to make those promises. So today, when we wake up and we tell the Zambian people to say, this man, the promises he made to you, he's not fulfilling them. He's running away from them. Each one of those promises. Then why should he come to us and tell us that you are abusing the freedom of expression which HH is giving us? HH doesn't have any freedom of expression to give to any Zambian. He doesn't have any freedom of expression.
We've moved from the freedom of expression. We're looking at the assessment.
So on that particular speech, at the end of the day, any president will run their presidency in the manner and fashion that they see fit. So it's not for me really to tell HH to say, look, you need to spend so much time in office with your cabinet ministers so that when you go out there, you are not speaking different languages, whereby one is saying cadres are encouraged, you are saying not. Others are saying roadblocks are cancelled. You are saying they need to be brought back. Spend more time with your cabinet. Agree on the policy of government so that when you go out there, if a minister makes a ministerial statement, it should be based on the discussions they had in cabinet. You understand? It's not for me to tell him that. He needs to be able to figure it out. But me as an opposition leader, it's my job to hold him accountable on the fulfillment of his promises. You understand? And our point is that he's spending more time making additional promises instead of him actually fulfilling the promises that he has already made to the Zambian people. Take, for instance, what he was talking about on Radio Phoenix a few days ago. The president was talking about how wonderful his 2022 national budget is going to be. And he's been talking about that for a long time. He started with that narrative, and then at some point his minister said, no, the 2022 budget will be a PF budget with a few adjustments from the UPND. You understand? That shows inconsistency. Then again the president comes and says, no, the 2022 budget will be our budget, and when we implement the new budget, then we'll begin to fulfill the promises we made to the Zambian people. So there's chaos, there's confusion in the UPND administration. You understand? And, if I make a statement to say this government is a bunch of incompetence, I make that statement with a free conscience because the evidence is there for all to see. Provided you are not someone who is indoctrinated, you've got objectivity and an independent mind, you can see that this government is totally, it's got no direction. It's not going anywhere. It's not going to take the people of this country anywhere.
All right. Quickly, let's get to the aspect of, the dissolution of the board from different parastatals rather, and the termination of contracts for the different duty bearers, as well as the employment freeze, which is still going on. What's your stance as PEP and as Sean Tembo on this?
So for us, on that one, Chisha, we are cognizant of the fact that a president has the mandate to choose the people he works with. You understand? We understand and appreciate that. So it doesn't matter who President Hichilema terminates. Listen.
Yes.
Get the point. Yeah, get the point.
Yeah.
The president has a mandate to fire and hire whoever he wants.
Yes.
Our bone of contention, Chisha, and I want you to understand my point very, very critically here.
Yes.
Our bone of contention is the issue that when the president fires people, when the president dissolves these boards, and he has dissolved more than 10 boards so far, 10 to 20 now, you understand? When the president fires permanent secretaries, he does not replace them.
Yeah.
So effectively, he's creating a vacuum. It is that vacuum that we are against. We are not against the president firing the people he doesn't want to work with. HH has that mandate. That's why he's the president of Zambia. He can fire anyone he doesn't like. Let him fire whoever he doesn't like. But when he fires people, let him replace those people so that there can be continuity of government, continuity of the economy. That is our point. And, Chisha, Zambia's economy, just like any other economy out there, the biggest player in Zambia's economy is the government and its agencies and parastatals. When you dissolve the boards of the parastatals, you dissolve the boards of all parastatals, and you don't replace those boards, what that means is that decisions cannot be made in those parastatals. It means that a contract which was awarded and waiting board signature cannot be signed for months, which means the person who was supposed to deliver on that contract and his employees are now on standby. The person maybe even went and hired people and said, I've been awarded a contract by RDA, and I'll start implementing. And those people are demanding salaries. And yet RDA cannot sign that contract to allow the work to begin because there's no board. Why is there no board? Because President Hichilema dissolved that board, and he does not want to replace the board. Why can't the president only dissolve a board when he has people ready to replace that board with? Why can't the president fire a PS when he has another PS to replace that PS with? Why is he creating a vacuum in the entire economy to the detriment of each and every Zambian? You understand? So there's that negative trickle-down effect which comes with you creating paralysis in government, paralysis in the economy. And, HH being an alleged economist, one would expect that he would understand how the trickle-down effect in the economy is. But apparently he doesn't understand that. So that is our bone of contention. And I want to make sure, Chisha, that you've gotten our point here. Have you gotten our point?
Yes, I have. But you said alleged economist. He is an economist from the...
Well, he's not. He did a double major at University of Zambia. He did a major in a half major in economics and a half major in public administration.
Well, he's still
he's not the same as an economist who goes to school and does a full degree in economics. You understand? He's more like a half economist.
All right, but he still graduated as an economist, Mr. Tembo. But anyway, let's quickly look at the factors that you've put in place in the next couple of years as you plan for the next election as patriots for economic progress or as the president of PEP, Mr. Sean Tembo. What are your plans in the next couple of years? What have you put in place?
So, next couple of years, from the point of view of our party, of course, we're going to continue with the checks and balances we've been providing to the government of the day. Whether they try to intimidate us, they should forget about that. Whether they allege that they are giving us freedom of expression, I've told the President Hichilema today to withdraw that freedom of expression that he is telling people that he is giving us. Let him withdraw it, because we draw our freedom of expression from the Constitution. So whether they intimidate us, we are going to continue providing checks and balances. You know why? Because we love this country. We love Zambia. We are patriotic Zambians. You understand? And we want the best for Zambia. And if we have a government that is incapable of delivering on the aspirations of the Zambian people, we are going to meet that government head on, just like we met the PF government head on. We are the only political party in this country that was able to do the largest number of protests. And yet we were not even the biggest political party. We are the only party that did a total of 18 successful protests against the PF government over corruption, including the one in Cairo Road where we were attacked. And I was personally hacked with a panga in my head. You understand? Did that stop us from holding the PF government accountable? It did not. Why? Because we love this country. So we'll continue loving this country and we'll continue providing checks and balances to the UPND government, or the UPND administration rather. Yes.
All right. Well, is that the only plan you have?
Of course, we are working on internal matters as well. We are growing our party. We were disappointed with our performance in the last election. Yeah. Of course, we understand the fact that the last election was more of a referendum. It wasn't about voting for the UPND. It was more about voting against the PF. So we understand that background, but we are working on our structures. So one of the things we did was we dissolved all the structures we had before elections, and right now we are constituting interim structures. These interim structures are across the country. We've received a number of applications so far. We are processing those applications, and our hope and wish is that in the next couple of weeks, our interim structures will be in place, and then these interim structures will move up to November next year when the party will hold internal elections, where substantive party positions will be filled during those elections. And then once we do that next year, it will be, go, all systems go until 2026. And come 2026, Chisha, I can assure you that those zeros that we were getting in certain polling stations in the last elections, in 2026, in 2026, it will not be us getting those zeros. It will be someone who has been making empty promises to the Zambian people.
Who's that one, Mr. Tembo? Who are we talking about?
Who else is making empty promises?
All right, let's get into the United Party for National Development, the administration and government will be unveiling the 2022 national budget. What is the expectation of that particular budget? And also, in addition, I do know for a fact that you actually give out alternative budgets that you constitute or construct as the PEP. When is your alternative budget as well going to be submitted or unveiled? Both questions as we wind up.
So our expectations with regard to the 2022 national budget is that the budget will be fair and equitable to all. Number one, we would want to see a shift, from social welfare to economic empowerment. Yeah. When you look at the PF budget, and we know that intricately because we are the only political party that has been consistently developing alternative national budgets. So when you look at the PF budget in the past, it was leaning more towards social welfare. Things like social cash transfer, things like FISIP.
Social protection.
Yes. So the bottom line is that, we are not a rich country. So we cannot be so much in the business of giving handouts. It is better to empower someone so that they do not need that social cash transfer of 200 kwacha, so that they are making their own money. And the only way to empower people, in our view, is to give them small loans. Give them small loans. When you look at the 2021 budget, which was done by the PF, they allocated a combined total of about 8 billion kwacha, when you combine social cash transfer and FISIP, towards social cash. They allocated a total of about 8 billion kwacha towards social welfare, when you combine social cash transfer and FISIP. On the other hand, they allocated about 256 million only towards economic empowerment in terms of giving people small loans. So what we're saying is that should be the other way around, because for as long as someone has got legs and hands, that person can be productive in the economy. Instead of giving them 100 kwacha as a social cash transfer per month, give them a 2,000 kwacha loan so that they can go and start a barber shop. Give them a 5,000, let me just finish. Yeah. Give them a 5,000 kwacha loan so that they can go and start ordering chickens and delivering. You understand? So you are economically empowering them. Gradually, some of those businesses will grow into multinational businesses. So our expectation from the 2022 budget is largely to allocate more resources towards economic empowerment. When it comes to taxation, we want the government to be fair and equitable. And one of the things that they should address is the issue of that 20% withholding tax on betting winnings. That tax is unfair, it is grossly unjustifiable. That tax should be removed. And we are hopeful that the government is going to do that. Why? Because taxation is supposed to be fair and equitable. It should not impose an undue burden on one person to the exclusion of other people. You cannot, as a government, exercise double standards, whereby to the people who are formerly employed, you give them a 4,000 kwacha exemption per month, which amounts to 48,000 kwacha per year. Right. To the people who are unemployed, you tax them even on a 20 kwacha. Is that fair or equitable? It's not. So all we are asking, all we are asking is that they should not, we are not asking them to do a favor to anybody, no. We are asking them to be fair and equitable to each and every Zambian, regardless of whether that Zambian is in formal employment or that Zambian is in informal employment.
All right. Now you quickly talked about giving the people 2,000 and as empowerment money, the people receiving social cash transfers. But of course, this amount is huge, Mr. Tembo. Why is your administration going to move such an amount of money to give to the people that need it?
Which amount is it?
You talked about instead of giving them a 200 kwacha, the government should give them 2,000.
That was just an example, Chishana.
Yes, but then it's an example that should be practical to the many Zambians that are working.
So when you look at, are you asking me why that amount?
Yes. Why are you going to move this amount that you've stated should be given to the people? Because at the end of the day, you
So the bottom line is that that amount. These empowerment loans cannot be given to each and every Zambian at once. We are not saying that it will be given to each and every Zambian at once. You have a certain category of Zambians. Let's say they, for argument's sake, 2 million Zambians who are in need of empowerment loans. 2 million Zambians. You can start with the first batch of 200,000 Zambians, which is 10% of the people. You give them the necessary loans they want. And you need to cap that loan, let's say, to a maximum of 10,000 kwacha, not more than that, depending on the business needs of that particular individual. So this one wants to start a hair salon, they want 3.5. Give them a 3.5. The other one wants to start selling cell phone, parts, screens, and whatever batteries. They want 7.5. Give them 7.5. So you give them different loans, and this should be repayable. It should be a revolving fund. So, and you don't let these people pay at the end of the month. No. Let them pay maybe every day, whatever they can afford. Put them on a payment plan of 50 kwacha per day. So every day, akomboka muntu, atenga 50 kwacha abweza koron. Mairofuti abweza koron. By the end of 2 months, that person would have paid off that 7.5 loan as a business of selling cell phone parts. That business is his. That money he has paid back, you get it, and then you give it to the next batch. And then give it to the next batch, and then the other batch. By the end of the 5-year term of my presidency, Mr. Chisha, I would have empowered 2 million Zambians. Why? Because it's a more sustainable approach, which means even the demand for social cash transfer, that 100 kwacha social cash transfer, will not be there because this person has a business now.
All right. I still have questions on that, but because of time, what is your alternative budget going to be available to the government or to the public?
So our custom in the past 5 years that we've been developing and presenting alternative national budgets is that we present our alternative national budget 2 weeks after the presentation of the official budget. We came up with that 2 weeks because when the official budget is presented, it takes time for people to access a copy. The one which is presented in Parliament is just a speech. There is now the actual budget. So it takes time for people to actually access a copy of the detailed budget. It takes time for people to actually read through that budget, the official budget. The whole idea is that by the time Sean Tembo presents the PEP alternative national budget, a good proportion of the population should have read and understood the official budget, so that when they look at the official budget and then they look at President Sean Tembo's alternative budget, they're able to see the differences and say, here, the official budget, they're saying they will allocate so much towards the student meal allowances. Here, President Sean Tembo, in his alternative budget, is saying he will allocate so much towards student meal allowances.
Basically, you're going to make your budget off the official budget that will be released. Is that what you're trying to say?
Of course not. Of course not. We have always presented our alternative national budgets after the official budget. Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right. So
because it's the alternative. Yeah. And something can only be an alternative of something else that exists, isn't it?
Yes.
You understand? Eh?
All right. Thank you so much for coming through. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Mr. Chisha, and a very good evening to the Zambian people. It was a pleasure.
Hopefully to have you soon as we continue to understand the opposition.
I look forward to.
Yes, and the role that they have in governance.
Thank you.
All right. My name is Chisha Chola. I've been your moderator for this particular evening. We've been talking to Sean Tembo, the PEP president. And of course, this has been your special interview. Until next time, my name is Chola Chisha. Good evening. Thank you for coming through.
Okay, cheers.
Yes.